Okay, good morning, everyone. Welcome to the third annual ANSER Symposium, the continuation thereof. We had a great start last night with Fraser Armstrong's keynote address, and this morning we're going to continue with what I certainly think is going to be a spectacular program by some real experts in the field of solar fuels. But before we get to that, I want to take this opportunity first to thank some people who have been really instrumental in making this event possible. First of all, I'd like to thank the ANSER staff, Katie Pitt and our Director of Operations, Torsten Fiebig. I'd also like to give a very big tip of the hat to the staff at ISON, the so-called Initiative for Sustainability and Energy at Northwestern, which is our umbrella organization which fosters those particular programs at our institution, and especially Bridget Calendo and Jane Wellner, who have been really great in supporting this effort and getting us this wonderful organization and this venue and so forth. And so thank you to those folks who really helped make this all possible. What I'd like to do before we launch into the talks is, for those of you who may not be familiar with ANSER and exactly what we're about, I'd like to give a brief introduction to our philosophy and our purpose and our role in doing science directed to solar energy. As the name implies, we're an organization that is Northwestern and Argonne-centric, but we have participants from Yale, from the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign, and from the University of Chicago. And so we are a U.S. DOE Energy Frontier Research Center, and we're funded as such last year. And we're quite excited about this and the possibilities of really making a serious contribution to renewable energy. So what is the problem, basically? And so the problem really is shown on this slide, and it's a short synopsis of a very serious problem. The serious problem is simply that irrespective of how hard we try to conserve, we need a heck of a lot more energy than we have now in the coming years. Estimates are roughly double by 2050 and triple by 2100. Most of this has to do with the developing world and the need to establish a decent standard of living for people worldwide. And as a consequence, it requires energy to do that. And the question is, how are we going to do this without completely compromising the quality of life on the planet, whether that be through climate change, through abuse of the environment, et cetera. It turns out, to make a very long story short, solar energy has the capacity to do this for us. And in fact, the amount of energy impinging on the Earth from the sun is about 120,000 terawatts compared to what we actually need. And even if you distill that down to a sort of parochial view, what falls on the land mass of the US, for instance, it's still 2,200 terawatts. So what we're aiming for is energy sources that have a low environmental impact, hopefully no environmental impact, and those that are geopolitically secure. In other words, we don't have to worry about our neighbors, so to speak, in a global sense with regard to who has the energy sources and who doesn't, who needs it and who doesn't. So that's really the problem in a nutshell. It's a tremendous problem, and we're all aware of this, but every so often it helps to just stand back and appreciate this in some degree. So what's ANSER's vision? ANSER's vision is to recognize that these scientific challenges are indeed complex, and to take a cross-disciplinary integrated systems approach to solving these problems using a larger research team. And basically what we want to do simply is to improve the conversion efficiency of solar photons to fuel and electricity. So it's a twofold problem. In other words, why do we want fuel? We want fuel because we need to store the energy. That's really important. In other words, the sun does go down, and days like today, the sun is not as intense as it reaches the earth, the ground, as would be on a sunny day. We need to do basic science in order to do this, to achieve a fundamental understanding of how this happens. And all of the FRCs are set up as fundamental research organizations. In other words, our main targets are not to do development, to actually make devices necessarily, even though we have a vision, if you will, or an endpoint that is some sort of device. We really don't know enough about the basic science in order to judge which directions are going to be the winners and which are going to be the losers at this point. In order to be able to do this, you need to be able to take advantage of molecular science. You need to take advantage of emerging nanoscience to design, prepare, and even self-assemble in the context of mimicking nature, new assemblies for solar energy conversion. So it's a materials and molecule-centric idea as well that drives us. And last but not least, because most of the effort is targeted toward young people, in other words, there are graduate students and postdocs involved in this enterprise, those of us who are a little bit more on the senior end of the years are not going to necessarily see the end of this problem in terms of its solution. And so it's really important to have an educated workforce that is going to carry us into the future. So how is ANSER set up? Well, it's set up in three directions, three subtasks, if you will. One to focus on artificial photosynthesis to produce solar fuels. One to understand interfacial science to generate new organic photovoltaics. And one task to understand how to make new nanostructured materials for electrodes in systems, for instance, like dye-sensitized solar cells. And we have three research teams that are focused on this as well. Here are some of the names involved. These are the PIs currently on these projects, and the highlighted people are the team leaders at this point. And so we have really world-class expertise in addressing these issues and these problems as a whole. As far as facilities go, between facilities here at Northwestern and at Argonne, we have really quite nice facilities as well. The complex of buildings that some of you were in last night when we heard Fraser Armstrong's talk. This particular building here, the Ryan Hall, which is our nanoscience center, is also many of us who are involved with the ANSER Center are headquartered there. Of course, we have the premier light source in the U.S. in the form of the APS right here at Argonne as well. And we have the Center for Nanoscale Materials, which has complementary capabilities and facilities relative to what we have here at Northwestern. And as I mentioned before, we have, at this point, 24 PIs involved. International teaming is extremely important in this whole business, not only with industry, but with academic institutions and with research institutes in general. And here is just a partial list of people we're involved with. I highlight the Swedish group because we have particular close relationships with them in form of student exchanges, et cetera. We also have a close relationship with the Weizmann Institute in Israel with a similar exchange relationship ongoing. So basically, it's a hard problem, and we need expertise from all quarters in order to be able to solve this problem. And so the collaborative nature of the enterprise is really important in solving the problem. So this is just a schematic portfolio of the kind of activities we're involved with, going all the way on the far left here from biomimetic solar fuels kinds of considerations involving self-assembly to various photovoltaic strategies all the way over to new electrode systems. And what I'm going to do for 5 minutes basically is give you a short synopsis of what's new this year and what is some of the new science that we're doing. This is only a very small part of it, but just will give you a flavor of what's happening. For instance, in the bio-inspired solar fuels area, we're interested in integrating light-driven charge separation with catalysis for water splitting and for proton reduction to hydrogen, which are the required chemistry in order to take water to hydrogen and oxygen. You burn the hydrogen as fuel. And for instance, the Yale group has come up with a variety of interesting water splitting catalysts over the years, and we're working very busily with them in order to develop integrated systems. Basically, for instance, the primary goal here, as I mentioned, is formation of hydrogen. And another natural system that we're interested in are hydrogenases. And our collaborator and center member, Tom Raukfus at Illinois, is our main connection in this regard. And we're doing a lot of work in the context of trying to develop new systems along this direction and to couple them with light-driven systems as well. For instance, recently we developed a novel complex that has redox properties that are really very close to what one finds for the natural cofactor in hydrogenases. And so we're developing the chemistry for these systems and developing ways, spectroscopic tools, in order to be able to tell whether, essentially what the mechanism of light-driven electron transfer to these complexes is. And so this is indeed an important direction as a whole in this particular subtask. In terms of looking at interfacial issues with regard to organic photovoltaics, we're looking for new materials, but it is in fact an interfacial problem too, because getting charge across numerous interfaces is incredibly important. And even though if you may have a very efficient and functional material as the active layer, you frequently find that you really take a beating in terms of efficiency as the charges attempt to cross various boundary layers in the system. And so we're trying to develop not only new transparent conducting oxide electrodes, but also developing new electron and hole blocking layers and using self-assembly to target more ordered arrays of processable materials that one would go into these systems. Some of the new directions that we've seen are on the interfacial layer part. We found that some really unconventional blocking layers, for instance, like nickel oxide, have really profound effects on benchmark bulk heterojunction semiconductor materials like the prototypical P3HT, PCBM type systems, where you get really great improvements in performance. But more importantly, if you use novel polymers that are being generated in our center now, you can do even better. And these are polymers generated by Luping Yu at the University of Chicago, and working in collaboration with Lin Chen and with Tobin Marks, we're developing systems that take advantage of the interfacial chemistry that is being developed here and these new polymers to get cell efficiencies in the 7 to 8% efficiency range at this point, which is getting to the point where one can be really serious about taking these to the next level, which would be a sort of an engineering phase. Lastly, on the third subtask, we're interested in nanostructured electrodes, because frequently what happens in classical systems like a Gretzel cell is that one is limited by charge mobilities in the titanium dioxide nanoparticles. In other words, charge percolation through these particles is relatively slow relative to back reactions that will, in fact, essentially kill the charge separation for you. So the idea is very simple. In other words, how do you make charge transport through this network a lot faster? And the way you make it a lot faster, basically, is by depending on, essentially, networks of materials that have very thin layers of active materials. In other words, so you don't have a long distance to go before you get to a much more conductive material. And so as a consequence, if you can increase the overall charge transport efficiency through these materials, then you can solve all the other problems that are vexing with regard to redox couples and so forth, because basically what you're solving is a overall competition problem, a kinetic problem, if you will, between the various processes that you need to be able to optimize. And so you relieve a major bottleneck in this particular context. So that is the sum of the kinds of things we're doing. And like I said, it's really the tip of the iceberg, so to speak, because we've got a lot of interesting things cooking along, as it were, at this point. And there's a lot of exciting science that's emerging. And we had our annual meeting yesterday afternoon, and there was a lot of exciting discussion about what's going to happen in the next few months. And so we're all pretty energized about this, and it's an exciting time to be involved in this particular kind of science. So with that, well, let's see, there's one more thing I wanted to talk about, actually. I forgot about this slide. This is a very important slide, so I shouldn't forget about it, basically, because this is work by Mercuri Konatzidis' group, where actually what one can do is now use self-assembly to generate biomimetic systems that look a lot like the iron-sulfur clusters that are in nature. And as a consequence, you can even make freestanding gels. You can notice that these gels have a color. So they can act as antenna chromophores and actually function as essentially inorganic antenna materials, which one can then functionalize with other charged transport materials. And so we have a lot of collaborative activity going on to develop these so-called chalka gels, which are showing some real promise at this point. So with that, let me just finish my remarks and say welcome once again to the 3rd annual ANSER Symposium. And I invite you all to have a lot of good discussions today and to meet the speakers and to enjoy yourselves during the day.